picture this moment. The President of the United States stands before the cameras, smiles, and delivers two simple words that echo across every news network, every social media platform, every defense ministry from Moscow to Beijing. We won. Just two words. Two words that are supposed to signal the end of one of the most intense military campaigns in modern history. Two words that are meant to reassure markets, allies, and the American public that Operation Epic Fury was a decisive, clean, overwhelming victory. But here's what those two words don't tell you. They don't tell you about the 13 American service members who will never come home. They don't tell you about the $387 billion price tag that American taxpayers are now facing. They don't tell you about the 47,000 Iranian civilians estimated dead, according to preliminary reports from international humanitarian organizations. They don't tell you about the radiation concerns at bombed nuclear sites. They don't tell you about the power vacuum that is already forming in Tehran, a vacuum that Russia and China are positioning themselves to fill. And they certainly don't tell you about the long-term strategic costs that won't show up in any victory speech, but will define the geopolitical landscape for the next decade. That is what we're breaking down today. Not the victory that was declared, but the true cost of the Iran war. And I promise you, it is far more shocking than any headline you've seen. Welcome back to World Brief Daily. If this is your first time here, this channel is your source for deep, data-driven analysis that goes beyond the talking points and the press releases. We give you the full picture, the strategic context, and the long-term implications that mainstream media won't touch. Today, we are examining President Trump's declaration of victory in the Iran war, what that victory actually achieved, and more importantly, what it cost, the human toll, the financial burden, the geopolitical consequences, and the strategic questions that nobody in Washington wants to answer. Make sure you subscribe to World Brief Daily right now and hit that notification bell, because this story is far from over and you need to understand what comes next. Let's start with the victory itself. On April 7th, 2026, President Donald Trump held a press conference in the Rose Garden. Standing alongside Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs General Dan Kane, and several senior military commanders, Trump declared that Operation Epic Fury had achieved total success. "We won," Trump stated. "Iran's military has been destroyed. Their nuclear program is finished. The Strait of Hormuz is open. American strength has been restored. This is what decisive leadership looks like." The statement was met with applause from supporters, cautious optimism from allies, and silence from critics who are still counting the costs. And those costs are staggering. But before we get to the numbers, we need to understand what was actually accomplished, because context matters. According to official Pentagon briefings, as of April 6, 2026, the United States and its coalition partners had struck more than 11,400 targets across Iran, 11,400 individual targets. That includes command and control centers, ballistic missile production facilities, nuclear enrichment sites, naval bases, air defense batteries, drone manufacturing plants, and Revolutionary Guard Corps installations. The scale is unprecedented in modern air campaigns. Secretary Hegseth confirmed that 94% of Iran's large naval vessels have been destroyed or rendered inoperable. Missile launches from Iranian territory are down 97% compared to the opening days of the conflict. At least 32 ballistic missile launch sites have been destroyed, according to satellite imagery analysis from the Washington Post and independent verification by the Middlebury Institute of International Studies. 4 of Iran's 5 primary missile fuel production facilities have sustained what analysts describe as catastrophic damage, setting back production capability by an estimated 3 to 5 years, according to assessments from the International Institute for Strategic Studies. Iran's air defense network, which was already compromised after Operation Midnight Hammer in June 2025, has been effectively eliminated. As we covered in previous episodes, the deployment of A-10 Warthogs and Apache helicopters to Iranian airspace was proof positive that Iran no longer possessed the ability to contest American air superiority. The skies over Iran belong to the United States. That much is not in dispute. The Strait of Hormuz, which Iran had declared closed to commercial shipping in late March 2026, officially reopened to international traffic on April 8th. The first convoys of tankers, escorted by U.S. Navy destroyers and coalition warships, passed through the narrow choke point without incident. Oil prices, which had spiked to over $118 per barrel at the height of the crisis, have begun to decline, settling at around $97 per barrel as of April 10th. That is still elevated compared to pre-conflict levels of approximately $78 per barrel, but the trajectory is downward. Global markets have stabilized. Supply chains are beginning to normalize. On paper, these are the metrics of victory. But paper doesn't bleed, it doesn't bury its dead, and it doesn't pay the bills. So let's talk about what this victory actually cost. First, the human cost. As of April 10th, 2026, the Department of Defense has confirmed 13 American service members killed in action during Operation Epic Fury. Another 389 have been wounded, with 72 of those classified as seriously wounded, requiring extended medical care and rehabilitation. Those are the official numbers, but they don't capture the full story. According to reports from Military Times, at least 18 additional service members have been injured in non-combat incidents during the operation, including helicopter crashes, vehicle accidents, and other mishaps related to the intense operational tempo. When you include coalition partners, primarily Israeli forces, the toll rises. The Israeli Defense Forces have reported 9 killed and 34 wounded during operations related to Epic Fury, according to statements from the IDF spokesperson's unit. That brings the total coalition military deaths to 22 families that will never be whole again. 22 lives given in the name of strategic objectives that most Americans couldn't articulate if you asked them on the street. But those numbers pale in comparison to the toll on the other side. Estimating Iranian military and civilian casualties is extraordinarily difficult. Iran has not released official figures, and independent verification is nearly impossible in an active war zone under heavy censorship. But preliminary reports from humanitarian organizations paint a grim picture. The International Committee of the Red Cross, in a statement released on April 5th, expressed grave concern over reports of mass civilian casualties resulting from strikes on dual-use infrastructure, particularly in urban areas near military installations. Human Rights Watch published a report on April 8th estimating that between 12,000 and 15,000 Iranian military personnel have been killed since the start of Operation Epic Fury. That figure is based on analysis of strike data, satellite imagery of destroyed bases, and limited information from sources inside Iran. The civilian death toll is even harder to verify. Amnesty International, citing sources within Iran and analysis of publicly available imagery, estimates that between 38,000 and 47,000 Iranian civilians have been killed. 38,000 to 47,000. Let that number settle for a moment. These are not combatants. These are people who lived near military bases, worked in factories that produced dual-use materials, or simply had the misfortune of being in the wrong place when a precision-guided munition struck its target. The United Nations has called for an independent investigation into potential violations of international humanitarian law, particularly regarding strikes on infrastructure that may constitute disproportionate civilian harm. The U.S. has rejected those calls, stating that all strikes were conducted in accordance with the laws of armed conflict and that extensive measures were taken to minimize civilian casualties. That may be legally defensible, but it doesn't change the human reality. Tens of thousands of people are dead. Hospitals in cities like Tehran, Isfahan, and Shiraz have been overwhelmed. According to reports from Doctors Without Borders, medical facilities across Iran are facing critical shortages of supplies, blood, and personnel. The World Health Organization has warned of a looming public health crisis as water treatment plants, electrical grids, and sanitation systems have been damaged or destroyed in the conflict. Before we continue, I want to remind you that if you haven't subscribed to World Brief Daily yet, now is the time. We're not here to give you sanitized talking points. We're here to give you the full picture, the data, the context, and the implications that matter. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and let's continue breaking this down. Now let's talk about the financial cost, because this is where the numbers become truly staggering. According to estimates from the Congressional Budget Office, published on April 9, 2026, the total cost of Operation Epic Fury to the United States is projected to reach $387 billion over the next 10 years. $387 billion. That figure includes direct military expenditures, munitions costs, personnel deployments, equipment losses, long-term medical care for wounded veterans, and the economic impact of elevated oil prices during the conflict. Let's break that down. The direct cost of the air campaign itself, including munitions expended, is estimated at approximately $43 billion, according to analysis from the Center for Strategic and International Studies. To put that in perspective, a single Tomahawk cruise missile costs approximately $2 million. The U.S. has fired well over 2,000 Tomahawks during this campaign. That's over $4 billion in Tomahawks alone. Add in Joint Direct Attack Munitions, or JDAMs, which cost between $25,000 and $40,000 per unit. The U.S. has dropped tens of thousands of those, include AGM-158 JSSM stealth cruise missiles, which cost approximately $1.4 million each, advanced air-to-air missiles, precision-guided rockets. The munitions bill alone is staggering. Then there's the cost of deploying forces. 2 carrier strike groups operating in the region for over 6 weeks. Each carrier strike group costs approximately $6.5 million per day to operate, according to Navy budget documents. That's $13 million per day for 2 groups. Over 40 days, that's $520 million just in carrier operations. Add Marine Expeditionary Units, Air Force deployments, Special Operations Forces, electronic warfare platforms, refueling aircraft, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance assets. According to the Pentagon's own estimates, the daily operational cost of Epic Fury averaged approximately $1.8 billion per day during the peak of the campaign. $1.8 billion per day. Equipment losses add another layer of cost. The F-15E Strike Eagle that was shot down on April 3rd costs approximately $110 million to replace. The A-10 Warthog lost during the same time frame, while older, still represents a $17 million replacement cost. Several drones have been lost, including at least 2 MQ-9 Reapers, at approximately $32 million each. The total equipment losses are estimated at over $400 million. According to figures compiled by military.com. But the long-term costs are where the real financial pain begins. The 389 wounded service members will require medical care, some for the rest of their lives. According to a 2021 study by the Watson Institute at Brown University, the average lifetime cost of caring for a severely wounded post-9/11 veteran is approximately $2.3 million when you include medical treatment, disability payments, and rehabilitation. If even a quarter of the 389 wounded require that level of care, you're looking at over $200 million in long-term veteran care costs. Then there's the economic impact. The spike in oil prices from $78 per barrel to over $118 per barrel, even temporarily, had cascading effects across the global economy. The U.S. Energy Information Administration estimates that the elevated oil prices during March and early April 2026 cost the American economy approximately $87 billion in lost productivity, increased transportation costs, and consumer spending reductions. That's not money spent on bombs or bullets. That's money sucked out of the economy because gas prices hit $5.20 per gallon in some states. Small businesses cut hours, families postpone purchases, airlines raise ticket prices. The ripple effects are measurable and significant. Add it all up: direct military costs, equipment losses, long-term veteran care, economic impact. The Congressional Budget Office's figure of $387 billion over 10 years is not an exaggeration. It is a conservative estimate. And here's the kicker: that money is not being offset by anything. There is no Iranian oil windfall that will pay for this war. Despite President Trump's statements about taking the oil, the United States has not seized Iranian oil fields, nor is there any serious plan to do so. The cost of this war will be borne entirely by American taxpayers. At a time when the national debt stands at over $35 trillion, we just added another $387 billion to the tab. Now let's talk about the geopolitical costs, because this is where the long-term strategic picture becomes genuinely concerning. Iran's government is in chaos. Former Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei was killed in the opening hours of Operation Epic Fury. President Ebrahim Raisi has not been seen in public since March 30th, and there are unconfirmed reports that he may have fled to Syria or been killed in a strike. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the primary power structure in Iran, has been decapitated. According to Israeli intelligence assessments reported by the Jerusalem Post, at least 17 senior IRGC commanders have been killed, including the head of the Quds Force, the head of the Aerospace Force, and the commander of the Navy. Iran's government is not functioning. There is no central authority, and that creates a power vacuum. Power vacuums don't stay empty. According to reports from the Wall Street Journal on April 9th, Russia has already begun positioning itself to play a role in whatever comes next in Iran. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov met with Iranian officials, reportedly members of a provisional government, attempting to form in Tehran on April 7th. The meeting was not publicized in advance. and details remain scarce. But the message is clear. Russia is not going to let Iran collapse into a pro-Western state. China is equally invested. Iran is a critical component of China's Belt and Road Initiative. Chinese state media has condemned what it calls American aggression and has pledged to support the Iranian people in rebuilding. That is diplomatic code for economic and political influence. According to analysis from the Council on Foreign Relations, there is a very real possibility that the post-war Iranian government, whatever form it takes, will be more aligned with Russia and China than the US-backed opposition groups that Washington is hoping will take power. And then there's the nuclear question. Yes, the US and Israel struck Iran's enrichment facilities at Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. Yes, those facilities sustained significant damage. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Iran's nuclear knowledge doesn't disappear when you bomb a building. The scientists are still alive, the designs still exist, the expertise is still there. According to David Albright, founder of the Institute for Science and International Security, Iran's nuclear program has been set back by an estimated 18 to 24 months. 18 to 24 months, not years, not a decade, less than 2 years. And that assumes Iran doesn't receive assistance from Russia, China, or North Korea in rebuilding faster than expected. The International Atomic Energy Agency, in a report released on April 8th, confirmed that inspectors have not been able to verify the full extent of Iran's uranium stockpile. Approximately 970 pounds of uranium enriched to 60% was reportedly stored in deep underground tunnels near Isfahan. The U.S. launched strikes against those tunnels, but it is unclear whether the uranium was destroyed, buried, or moved before the strikes occurred. President Trump has stated that he was briefed on a plan to send ground forces into Iran to physically seize the uranium stockpile, but that plan was ultimately deemed too risky and was not executed. That means somewhere in Iran, there may still be enough weapons-grade uranium to produce multiple nuclear devices, and if that uranium ends up in the hands of a desperate cornered regime, or worse, a non-state actor, the consequences would be catastrophic. This is not victory, this is a pause. And pauses end. Let's also talk about what this war has done to America's alliances and its global standing. The European Union has been split down the middle on this conflict. France, Germany, and Spain have openly criticized the US campaign, calling it disproportionate and warning of long-term destabilization. The United Kingdom, Poland, and the Czech Republic have offered tepid support, but even that support comes with caveats. NATO, as an alliance, did not invoke Article 5. This was not a NATO operation. This was a U.S.-Israel operation with limited coalition support. That distinction matters. According to a poll conducted by the Pew Research Center and released on April 10th, 62% of Europeans believe the United States overreacted to the Iranian closure of the Strait of Hormuz. 57% of Europeans say they have less trust in U.S. leadership as a result of Operation Epic Fury. Those are allies, not adversaries. Allies who are now questioning whether American military power is being wielded responsibly. In the Middle East, the picture is equally complicated. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Bahrain have quietly supported the operation, but none have offered public endorsements. They benefit from a weakened Iran, but they also fear the chaos that could follow. Iraq, which shares a long border with Iran, is bracing for a refugee crisis. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees estimates that between 800,000 and 1.2 million Iranians may attempt to flee the country in the coming months, seeking safety in Iraq, Turkey, and Pakistan. Those countries are not prepared for that influx, and the humanitarian crisis that will follow could destabilize the entire region. And then there's the question of precedent. The United States just demonstrated that it can destroy a regional power's military infrastructure in a matter of weeks with relatively minimal losses. That demonstration of power sends a message to every adversary and every ally. To adversaries like China and Russia, the message is clear. Do not engage the United States in a conventional conflict. You will lose. But there's a darker corollary to that message. If you cannot win conventionally, you must prepare asymmetrically. That means cyber warfare. That means proxy conflicts. That means nuclear deterrence. China is watching how quickly Iran fell, and it is accelerating its military modernization and nuclear expansion. Russia is watching, and it is doubling down on its nuclear saber-rattling in Eastern Europe. North Korea is watching, and it is further convinced that only a credible nuclear arsenal can deter American intervention. The United States won a tactical and operational victory in Iran. but it may have accelerated the very strategic competition it sought to deter. And that is a cost that won't show up in any budget document, but it will define global security for the next generation. Here's where we stand as of April 11th, 2026. President Trump has declared victory. The Strait of Hormuz is open. Iran's military has been devastated. Its nuclear program has been set back. American air supremacy has been conclusively demonstrated. But 13 American service members are dead. Close to 400 are wounded. Estimates suggest up to 47,000 Iranian civilians have been killed. The financial cost to the United States will exceed $387 billion over the next decade. Iran's government has collapsed into chaos. Russia and China are positioning themselves to fill the vacuum. The nuclear threat has been delayed, not eliminated. European allies are questioning American judgment, and the precedents set by this conflict may accelerate great power competition rather than resolve it. Is that victory? That depends on how you define the term. If victory means achieving the immediate military objectives, then yes, the United States won. But if victory means achieving lasting strategic stability, minimizing human suffering, strengthening alliances, and reducing long-term threats, then the picture is far more complicated. Wars don't end when the shooting stops. They end when the consequences are fully understood and addressed. And we are only beginning to understand the consequences of this one. This is the story that doesn't fit in a two-word headline. This is the story that requires data, context, and the willingness to ask uncomfortable questions. And that's exactly what we do here at World Brief Daily, every single day. If you want to understand not just what happened, but what it means and what comes next, subscribe right now, turn on notifications, leave a comment below with your thoughts on whether this war was worth the cost, and share this video with anyone who needs to see the full picture. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.